Hey there, brothers and sisters. Joseph Dobbs here from True Discussion. This week, we had a very special guest joining us, the Kyle Thompson from Undaunted Life. Kyle has a ministry focusing specifically geared toward men. In fact, if you open up his website, the headline you'll see there is Equipping Men to Push Back Darkness. This is some good stuff out there for you gentlemen, and I recommend you check him out. Kyle has been featured on some other podcasts as well, things like Cooper Stuff, Unashamed with Phil and Jace Robertson. So I really highly suggest you check him out at Undaunted Life. Now, Chris and I had Kyle on to discuss one of his specific series called The Foxhole. And it's this idea that as a man, you should really be intentional with who you have as a close, tight circle in your life. You know, these other men that you're going to be develop friendships with and relationships with. And you want these men to be Christian, you want them to be mentally, physically, and spiritually resilient. And so Kyle joins us to sort of discuss the ins and outs of that and what that looks like. And, you know, we thank Kyle for joining us because he took time out of his busy schedule to hang out with a couple knuckleheads like us from Goodland, Kansas. So brothers and sisters, I hope you enjoyed as well.
Kyle Thompson, welcome to the show, my man.
Glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming in. Again, sorry about the pushing it tight, but brothers and sisters, Kyle, we were going to have you just kind of, could you give a quick spiel for the listeners that may not know you, a little bit about you and your ministry?
Yeah. So Kyle Thompson, my ministry is out of Oklahoma. The ministry is called Undaunted Life. And the whole reason that we're here is to equip men to push back darkness. And so we started that back in 2017, really 2016. It started out with some devotionals on the YouVersion Bible app, and they've done incredibly well. And then that kind of, spurred it on the podcast because I didn't want to keep writing. I wanted to more so just kind of set, here's a few things on my mind and then just go ahead and talk about it. And then the podcast has continued to expand and grow since 2017. We started adding guests right at episode 100. But the big thing about our ministry, to kind of even wrap it up, is there's a lot of things that churches and especially pastors, especially even the more effeminate pastors, don't want to touch. They don't want to touch the cultural topics. They don't want to touch things that could be divisive. They don't want to touch things that might be a little bit hot or any of those types of things. And that's the type of stuff that we know guys around are worried about. And they're struggling with how they can push back darkness. And our ministry really doesn't appeal to kind of that, typical church guy, air quotes for anyone that's listening and not watching this. Our ministry really appeals more to the fighter, the retired military, active duty military, police officers, like those types of folks. It's just because we don't really shy away from the things that more of your kind of typical church guy, khakis and pressed shirts guy, that he wants to stay away from. So I think that's a decent way to introduce what we do.
Absolutely, man. And I think that's a good description. I've been listening for a little bit. Actually, where I heard you was on John Cooper's podcast. And ever since then, that's when I started following you. So I'm excited to be able to engage you today. Did you grow up in the church? I don't know if you've explained that or not on your podcast, but what brought you to Christ?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in a family that was more like nominally Christian because I was born in Oklahoma. So if you're born in Oklahoma, right, you're Christian by dint of birth, right? Sure. You're born in this red clay. So all of a sudden you believe in God. And so church was not really a part of my family life at all. My mom was dragging us to this Church of Christ church for a couple of years, like in junior high. And I didn't really understand it. And one day when we're driving home, she's like, well, do you think it's about time you get baptized? And I'm like, yeah, my concept of baptism at the time was you get dunked, all the sin that's on you gets washed away. And then you get dunked periodically throughout your life to make sure that the amount of sin on you. And the reason why I had that paradigm is because when I was like 5 or 6 years old, my grandmother passed away from cancer. And I remember her being baptized like literally a day or two before she passed away. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So try to plan your death as good as possible. Make sure you're close enough to a church so that you can get all that nasty sin off you before you end up, going before the Father for judgment or whatever. But when I was in 10th grade, I was at a kind of I was really active in a youth group. And the thing about it is the only reason I went to this youth group is because that's where all the hot girls were hanging out on Wednesday nights. So that's where I wanted to be. That was my actual motivation. But there was a guest preacher that was brought in on a Sunday evening because I did, the Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday evening. And he was more kind of the hellfire and brimstone type guy. And I'm like, dang, look at all these earthquakes and volcanoes. I guess, the world's about to end. I don't want to go to hell. Mm-hmm. And so I raised my hand and answered the call. And, from there started digging into the New Testament, digging into the word, and then, progressively kind of led into where I'm at now. And I know that's a very, summary or a broad brush summary of kind of where I've been. But for the most part, around the same time I was learning what it meant to be a Christian, I was learning what it meant to be a man. 14, 15, 16 years old. And that's really led to why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I think there's a lot of people that struggle with the seeming dichotomy between being manly and being godly.
Right. Yeah. Well, because my follow-up question would be why men's ministry, and you've kind of touched on that for sure. Would you want to dig into that a little more, or is that,
ask me whatever you want to ask.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, why ministry? I mean, obviously you talk about some of the deficiencies that you've seen, and I fully 100% agree. And I think that's definitely why your ministry appeals to me. But why men's ministry?
Yeah, I think the thing is because, and I didn't really have the words for this early on, in my teenage years, but most men's ministry is just women's ministry for men. And so they take what works for women's ministry, which is, here's the book, and we're all going to sit in the same room and we're all going to read this book. And then we're going to go around and say what work's been like. And oh my gosh, what our crazy kids are doing. Yeah. And then we're just going to move on after we've sipped our coffee. Right. And it's just like, that's great for a certain segment of the population, a feminine segment of the population. Sure. But the thing about men is men connect shoulder to shoulder before they connect eyeball to eyeball. Women just connect eyeball to eyeball and stay that way. They love doing things in a circle, whereas we like doing things shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. And so I felt like most of the men's ministries that I was familiar with, most of the men's ministries that I was involved with, some of the men's ministries I even helped start, everything like the be all end all of their ministry was to get guys into a small group. And I was like, is that really the call, to get everybody into a small group? And to a degree, I encourage people to do that. We call it a foxhole, but it's like, no, you're assigning men to a group. Like, that's not how groups form. Right. Typically, like, you're not doing anything. You're not developing each other. You're not doing anything difficult or accomplishing a goal. Right. You're just hanging out. You're just in a circle together with a bunch of dudes that wouldn't be there for you at 3:00 in the morning, and you had a body that you needed to bury. Right. And so that's kind of where a lot of our philosophies and a lot of things that we're doing kind of go into. But that's kind of the core thing, is there's such a faulty idea as to what men's ministry is. And churches are the worst at it because they think men's programming is men's ministry. Right. So they think if once a year they do a chili cook-off for the men, or, a 6 a.m. Saturday morning prayer breakfast with, a retired Navy SEAL who used to chase women and beat up guys at bars, but now he's saved, they think that's good enough. Right. It's like, that's programming. That's fine. That's good. I'll go hang out, but that's not ministry. Right. You haven't made your church man friendly by doing that. And then you're shocked every year when the number of men in your church continues to go down. When every time you have a run for volunteers or something like that, 75% of them are women. You're shocked when you see women that are married coming to church with their children and their husbands aren't there. You're like, well, I just don't really know what's going on. It's because your church isn't man friendly. It doesn't have anything to do with how crappy your programs are. Right. That's not repelling them. Your church is. Right. Wow.
Now, you didn't go to school specifically for ministry, correct?
No, I got a leadership scholarship to the University of Central Oklahoma. It was a full ride scholarship that I was blessed with. And my wife actually got the same scholarship the year after I did. So that's how she and I met in college. But I studied corporate communication and leadership in my undergrad, and then I got my MBA. So yeah, no formal theological training. So if any of you big theology nerds think that I'm not, able to talk about this, you can go ahead and turn this off and move on with your life. But otherwise, I'll just let you know I can read too. So
yeah. I wanted to kind of go back to something you were mentioning. The once a year chili cook-off that we have, and yeah, that's fine. But I was going to ask you, Kyle, if you kind of are on the same page. Where my one complaint about men's retreats that I've gone on, I get something from them, I enjoy them, that's fine. But the one thing I always complained about was, you get a group of men, all strangers, and they meet each other for about 3 days, and you release a lot of emotion. Maybe there's some confessions and stuff, and that's fine. But then nothing is done with that 3-day weekend. These men are going back home, and they're facing the exact problem they were just crying and weeping about, and nothing's done.
Yeah, it's church camp for adult males.
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. And
Yeah.
so like I used to be a part of a ministry here, actually helped found a ministry here. The entire ministry was centered around, yes, getting guys in these small groups, but also doing these retreats a few times a year. And I had some fundamental differences with them because all they did was repackage John Eldridge's material. Right. So they would get the John Eldridge videos and they would just like push play for 3 days. And, there'd be some good meals and there'd be some, kickball and some other random crap that we would do. And it was fine. And It was fun. And yes, we would do the dramatic fireside confessionals where guys are writing down their sins on a piece of paper, crumpling it up and throwing it in the fire as if that does anything. And, these guys would leave and you're exactly right. Guess what happens when they get home Sunday afternoon? Honey, I can't believe why weren't you answering your phone? Like the kids like pooped in the floor and then the other kid threw up and then the dryer's not working anymore. And I've got all this clothes. Like maybe that's it. Or maybe it's, hey, we got a fire at work. Like, we're about to lose our biggest client. Like, what have you been doing all week? The fire starts immediately whenever you get home.
Yep.
So by Tuesday morning, you're back in your normal routine because you have to be, because there's all these people that are depending upon you to be the soldier or to be the CEO or to be the salesman or to be the husband or to be the father or to be the coach. And you're right back into it. But that's always the problem is that shouldn't be the focus. Come to this retreat, right? Come to this event, come to this fun thing, because that's what it ends up staying as a retreat.
Right.
Here's this thing I did. I checked the box for the year. I spent 3 days with other dudes and I held them while they cried and I moved on with my life. Now, I know that there are guys, I'm giving short shrift. There are guys whose lives have absolutely changed.
Yeah.
Their lives have been irrevocably changed. They've admitted some sin in their life. They've made adjustments to things. And so I don't want to give it too much of a short shrift, but again, that shouldn't be the focus. And when people look at that and say that's men's ministry, it's like, no, that's an outworking of men's ministry because what's going to go on a year from now? They're going to lose that buzz. They're going to lose that high. They're going to lose that motivation. And there's no foxhole of guys around them to push them anymore.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because that's one of the biggest reasons that we wanted to engage you or for the purposes was for a godly and manly foxhole. Because what we're talking about here and what you're alluding to is practical, actual men's ministry. And so what does it look like? And so we want to spend, the majority of the time left with you talking about that. So if you could, and for the listeners, on Kyle's podcast, Undaunted Life, he talks about this in massive depth. And so we're not going to cover every little detail of that. You can go listen to the episodes, and we'll put a link in the description for you guys. Now, but if you could give just a brief summary of what is a godly and manly foxhole.
Yeah. So we released a devotional last summer. I think it was last June. So it's on our website. If you go to undaunted.life, you can find it there. And I'm sure you guys will put in the show notes, like you said. And the overwhelming reason why we did this is because around episode 150 of the podcast, and as of the recording of this, I think we have 270, 271, something like that have been released. Around episode 150, I turned to a couple of dozen people that I knew listened to the show basically from the beginning. And I said, if you had to pick out some episodes, 3 or 4 episodes that you thought would like summarize who we are and what we do and kind of our motivation, what would be the ones that you would pick? And the thing is I got a lot of different answers, right? Episode 4 was a big one for a lot of people, but every single one of the guys, all of them, chose episode 104 of the podcast, which was called Your Foxhole.
Yeah.
And they were just, they had never really heard it, a men's group described in that way. They had never really heard it kind of philosophized in the way that I did it. And I was like, okay. So I kind of like logged that away. Like, okay, this is a concept that has some legs. And then last year it's like, okay, I really need to dedicate some more time to this and to let guys know what a foxhole is. How can you make it godly and manly? And so what we did in that foxhole, and we literally are not going to have the time today to really go into all the different specifics.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was 7 different lessons. And the first one was what makes a godly man. The second one was what makes a manly man. The third one is, can you be both godly and manly? Mm-hmm. The fourth one was Jesus a manly man? Because he is God incarnate. So obviously he's godly, but is he a manly man? And then kind of the second half or the rest of it was, what is a foxhole? That was day 5. Day 6 was, I can't even remember. It was like, what is a foxhole? Why do men need a foxhole? And then how do you build it? I think is how we kind of wrapped it up. But that was really what we looked at. Like a foxhole is a group of men that are constantly pushing each other to cultivate spiritual, mental, and physical resilience on a daily basis. Now, there's a lot packed into that one statement,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Sure,
And like
You
I
know,
said, I encourage the listener to go listen to it because it really was. It was a great, and it's one that I shared a lot of too because I gleaned a lot of truth from it, and that's why we're engaging here. A couple months ago, we did. And we didn't name it anything, but it was like basically like a battle buddy check-in. And really that's where this whole me reaching out to you came from, is just because we have got to work to develop these relationships, right? Where we can engage one another and challenge one another and all those things. There's a criteria for it. Like I said, man, I really appreciated just the notion of a foxhole. I think men do need that. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, is in that episode 104, you did not talk about like being a godly man as a criteria. Was that implied because of your ministry or I guess, but you did clarify, obviously, when you went through the series at like 202 through, was it 208 or something like that?
I literally have no idea.
Yeah,
one of the things
fine.
was, so that's the funny thing is when I get interviewed on people's shows, I don't want to see the questions beforehand because I think that leads to an unnatural interview. And so I'm always kind of surprised in what people want to talk about. Sure. And so people will ask me very specific questions like, hey, you had this quote on episode 78 that you recorded back in 2018. Yeah. It's like, bro, I don't remember what I said Tuesday.
Right. I'm with you.
I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. And so too many shots to the head. But the whole big thing about that is with episode 104, I didn't record that and write that episode thinking it was going to be anything.
Yeah.
Right. There are some episodes, guys, that, oh man, I put all of my creative juices into it. I'm wringing my soul into everything that I'm doing. And then it lands with a thud. It's just like,
hey, mark that question off the list. Yeah, that was one of our...
it just leads to nothing. Yeah. And then I'll record stuff. And then it's just like, I get blown up with emails and DMs like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. Or, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about this my entire life. Well, episode 104 was just like that. So I didn't feel the need, guys, to go in and come up with a whole lot of philosophies around it. It was more so an outworking of what I already felt, what I was already feeling, what was kind of already there. And then when I saw there was a deep desire and interest for more of that, and believe me, I did episode 104. Then I did a devotional. Now people want a book. And so they're like, hey, we need even more of this. We need even more of an explanation and more ideas as to kind of what we can do around that. So, stay tuned. Maybe that'll be coming down the pike.
Well, there you go. There's one of my questions too, man.
See, now that everyone's going to think I had the questions beforehand.
No.
I had no idea.
No, man. Well, you're an avid reader too. So I feel like I always wonder, because that's not like a super strong suit. And I'm growing. I'm trying, man. I feel like you challenged me for sure in that. But I always wonder if someone that is an avid reader, does that naturally make them give them the desire to write too?
Yeah. So let's make a clarifying point here. I am a reluctant reader.
Oh, is that right?
Okay. So most of the things I do in my life are because of reluctance. Do you think I wanted to work out at like 5:45, 6 a.m. this morning? You think I wanted to lift heavy things off the ground and put them back down? No, I didn't want to do that. If I could have all the benefits of powerlifting without having to powerlift, I would just take it. If I could just snap my fingers and stay asleep, I would take it. It's a reluctance, but it's also a duty. Yeah. And so here's the thing. Men, there are two types of men in this world. There are men who read books, and then there are morons. And so that's the thing is a lot of guys think, I don't need to read books. I did that in high school.
Right.
I did that in college. I'll just listen to podcasts. I'll listen to other people talk that have read books. I don't need to do the work for myself, but let's go back to the workout example. Yeah. Are you going to watch the Mr. Olympia competition and then all of a sudden get stronger?
Right.
Are you going to watch or listen to a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast where he's talking to some power lifter and get stronger yourself? No.
Yeah.
You've got to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so last year I read 45 books. It's the most books I've ever read in one calendar year. A lot of that is by virtue of the podcast because most people are lazy. Most people are turds. And so people that, host a podcast and then they have a guest on, they don't do any prep work. They're not reading the books. Right. They're not listening to other interviews, but I want that person to know, hey, you donated an hour of your time to me. Yeah. I read your books. I listened to your interviews. I asked you questions that you have never been asked before. And my audience is going to get a little bit something different from my interview of you than other people's interviews of you. And that's one of my main compliments that I get all the time. It's like, man, you actually read this. Because the thing is, guy, the reality is I don't read because I like it that much. It's hard for me. Like I don't have this brain that can just buzz through this difficult material. I have to go back and reread stuff. I'm not a speed reader. Like that's part of the reason why I don't read fiction is because I can't keep the story straight.
Right.
Especially if it's a convoluted, 3 dozen main characters and multiple, stories going on at once. My brain just can't do that. But that's not an excuse. A lot of guys will use that as that excuse. Be like, well, I'm not that smart, so I guess won't read books. It's like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you should never go to the restaurant because you're hungry. Yeah, you should never go for a run because you're out of shape. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And guys are especially bad about that. Christian guys, even worse than even the general public. But that's just something that I don't think you can really get away with, especially every week. If you guys could see my notes for my podcast, you would be appalled at how little I have in front of me on the screen. But the only reason why I can put 5 bullet points on my screen and talk for 45 minutes is because I've got all this material. That mostly I've read, but also that I've listened to or watched that's just pinging around in my ridiculous ginger brain, just waiting to come out of my face. That's part of the reason why I usually have no idea what I've said. So when someone says, hey man, I listened to your podcast on Tuesday, I always get a little bit worried. I'm like, oh, what did I say? Did I say a bad word? Did I say something that someone's not really going to like? But yeah, I guess the overall point where you started with this is just reading, but did want to clarify that avid reader would probably not be the most appropriate title.
That's fair. I stand corrected. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to go back because you had mentioned there's episodes you pour your soul into and it's like, well, nothing happens. And then a topic like this, the Foxhole, like kind of getting back to that where it just kind of blew up and there was a need for it. To me, it's interesting that you would get that explosion, this cry out for, give us more of that. What did you mean by that? Yet, one of the complaints that we get in your series, and it needed to be addressed, was you mentioned on many occasions, most men don't have these 3 a.m. friends. So it's interesting to see men crying out for this, yet it's not there.
Well, part of the thing is because guys are used to things being really, really easy.
Well, and you've already alluded to nobody wants to do the work.
Right. In our modern context, I don't have to go out and find dinner. I go down to my refrigerator and pull it out. And you know how I got that food? I went to the grocery store where someone else killed that meat, where somebody else packaged it and, took all the blood out so it wouldn't make me feel icky, right? I don't have to do those things. So many things that we do in life are easy. We lay on these plush mattresses. We get up and, we drive to work in our plush vehicles and we sit in a climate controlled room for 8 to 10 hours a day. And then we come home. Everything's very easy. It's so comfortable. And so these guys, they love to lament, right? Oh, and I'll use a workout example because it's the easiest one. Man, I'm just not as good a shape as I was when I was 18 years old. Well, you're 40 years old and you haven't been working out for 22 years. So I'm not great at math, but I'm assuming that has something to do with it. Yeah. And so you have these people that I wish I had a 6-pack. I wish I could go walk to the top of a flight of stairs without being out of breath. I wish I could hold my kids and carrying them through the park a little bit longer. I wish I could do all these things. And yet they don't do the things that are required in order for them to enjoy those things that they want.
Right.
The same is true for men's groups. Yeah. Oh, I don't have any 3 a.m. friends. I haven't had a friend since I left my fraternity. I haven't had a friend since I left the military. I haven't had a friend since, police academy or something like that. It's like, and whose fault is that?
Right.
Why are you screaming at the sky? That's not going to give you the answers.
Do you think that it's devoid of value? I mean, surely if they're lamenting on it, they value it, but yet then again, there's no action. So is it really devoid of value?
Well, that's the thing is I think most people, they do this mental masturbation where they know the answer, but they're not willing to work towards it. So how many people smoke cigarettes and have no idea that they kill you? Is there one person on the planet that doesn't know that? Right.
Yeah.
They know that they don't give a damn. That's the difference. And so this is the thing is people pretend like they care because they know they're supposed to. And it sounds good when they go to the prayer meeting, they say, oh man, I really wish I had a group of guys around me, even though they have no intentions of joining a group like that or starting a group like that. They're saying it because it sounds good. Right. Yeah. It's kind of like when people ask you, hey, how you been, John? How you been, Jimmy? How you been, Todd? Oh, I'm busy. Because that's what we're supposed to say.
Right.
Like that's what we're supposed to say in common society. And that's also a stiff arm.
Oh,
because it's like, hey, don't ask me about work. Don't ask me about my marriage. Don't ask me about my kids. Don't ask me about that extra 3 inches on my belt line. Hey, I'm just busy. Oh, I'm just working, brother. Or if you're at church, it's, oh, I'm blessed. God is good. It's all this churchy bumper sticker BS. And that's the thing is they're pretending. It's a lie. But they know deep down in their heart when everyone in the house is asleep, when the dog has just been kicked out of the bed, when the lights are turned off and they're just sitting there in their bed, even if there's someone laying next to them, they know they are completely and utterly alone. And they also know that they are unwilling to change it.
Yeah. So what are the implications of not having this group of men, this foxhole, as you talk about?
Isolation is killing men. Mm-hmm. Suicidality for men in the United States is skyrocketing. And this is pre-COVID. I know COVID has done a lot of things with that. Substance abuse, the number one leading cause of death in the United States right now for adults age 18 to 49 is fentanyl overdose, not just overdose on any substance, fentanyl overdose. And it's these men that are alone, that have no community around them. They've convinced themselves, they've taken the lie from Satan that they don't have any worth. No one needs them, right? The church doesn't need them. Their wife doesn't need them. Their kids don't like them. There's no men around them that if they were to be gone, that would miss them. Right. Man. And they don't get to do the Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, thing where they get to like almost pretend like they're dead and go to their own funeral and watch all these people cry from the rafters or something like that. They don't have that as a part of their life, but it's this sheer and utter loneliness, and this loneliness and isolation kills men. And if it doesn't kill them bodily, it kills them spiritually. Oh, they have nothing to give, because there are men in my life that are very, very close to me. And I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, because who knows who all is going to listen to this. But there are men that I love dearly, that their life revolves around work, home, television, sleep, work, home, television, sleep. And that's it. They give. And then they're sad. They're sad that they don't have friends. They're sad that they don't have people that they can depend on and rely on. They're sad when something is broken and they don't know how to fix it. They don't have a list of people in their phone that they can go to. Or when they're struggling with something in life, they've lost a family member or they've gotten sick or something like that. They have no one that they can rely on, which only continues and exacerbates that cycle of loneliness and isolation.
Why do you think men don't take that next step? I mean, is it complacency or why? What, in your estimation?
You guys, you tell me. Complacency is one. Keep going.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Laziness.
Laziness is a big one for sure. We're taking the easy route.
I mean,
the answer is to whatever you were going to say and to whoever I was going to say is yes. Okay. That is the answer. Guys will create any number of excuses to not do the things that they know that they need to do. And part of it is because culturally we're in that place now. And you've probably heard me say this or heard other people say this. It's hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times make weak men make hard times. Right now, we've got a lot of weak men that are creating these hard times. And so we might be a generation or two or three away from this all kind of getting, recycled and changed, and, men will be different. But right now we're living in this lap of luxury. We haven't had a war that was fought by the general populace since the early 20th century, right? We've isolated our warriors, right? And then we have the rest of the population back here that just gets to sit around and get fat and happy.
Right.
Yeah. On that, we kind of wanted to, maybe it's a side trail, but we talked about the implications of not having that foxhole. And my goodness, the consequences are endless and depressing to even talk about. But if we could kind of, maybe from your perspective, do you have a time, and I don't know if you like to reflect and go, I wish I had a foxhole at that scenario in my life. Do you have any of those moments?
I mean, not really, because I've had community with men for the majority of my adult life before I knew it was so important. And so to a certain degree, that may be a little bit natural for me. Like I've been on teams my entire life. I played sports my entire life. And so I kind of had those built-in male friend groups. I mean, would it have been cool to have a foxhole as a 13-year-old when my parents were getting divorced? Yeah, but I mean, you're 13 years old. Your brain's like 12 years away from being fully developed. Like you can barely go to the bathroom without peeing on yourself. So it's like, why do you need a foxhole at that point? But there really haven't been. I don't want to create an example out of thin air just for dramatic sake. But there hasn't really been a scenario where I felt like I truly needed community. I felt like I've always had people that I could depend on and rely on. But I do think this is a good time to kind of make the point. I make this point in that series. Is most guys have 6 p.m. friends. And so these are guys that are available to you until about 6 p.m. So if you've got a question about taxes, if you need to move a refrigerator, if you need to talk to them about something that's going on in your life, these guys are available until about 6 p.m. But after that, they got to put the kids to bed, and I got to get a little bit more work done, or I got to work on my side hustle, or I got to fix this fence, or I got to do this, I got to do that. They're not available to you. What you need are 3 a.m. friends. So these are guys that you can call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not only will they answer, right, but you can hear them. They're putting their pants on. They're putting their boots on. They're clicking their firearm into their holster and they're jamming it into the appendix position, and they're getting ready to go because they assume something's up. They don't get a call from you at 3 o'clock in the morning for no reason. It's guys like that. Or it's guys like a friend of mine actually just got through having lunch with him, a friend of mine named Adam. I'm on my way, friends. And so when our first son, James, who's now about a year and a half old, and we have another son who, Lord willing, will be joining us here in March. But whenever he was 6 weeks old, when our firstborn was 6 weeks old, we were on our second trip to the emergency room in the middle of the night in as many days, right? Emergency surgery, potential of death, horrible situation for first-time parents, for anybody, right?
Right.
And so I forget the circumstances, but while all this is going on, I get a call from my buddy, Adam. He says, "Hey, Kyle, I know you're in the thick of it right now. I'm on my way to your house to take care of your dogs for you. I just don't know how to get in. Let me know how to get in the house. And if you can't tell me how, I'll figure it out."
Right.
I'm here as opposed to the guy that sends you a text and says, "Hey, brother, I know you're in the thick of it right now. Praying for you. Hey, if there's anything that I can do for you, will you let me know?" Which now puts the onus on me to figure out something for you to do so you can feel better. I'm sorry. I'm the one that's struggling right now. I'm the one that's thinking I'm handing my 6-week-old over to a doctor and I'm never going to see him again. But yeah, sure. Let me stop what I'm doing to come up with a chore list for you. No, Adam, who has never met my dogs, who has never been around and helped in that context, was on his way to my house to take care of them because he knew that was something that he needed to do. Those are the guys that you need in your life. Not the "I'll pray for your brother" stuff. Not "I'll add you to the prayer list." And I'm not saying prayer is not important, but at some point you got to do something.
Yeah,
if you want to bless somebody directly, you might have to get up and move.
Right. Yeah. Well, faith without deeds is dead,
man.
Right? So is it more important to sort of find or build this foxhole or be the right guy for the foxhole? It seems like being a man of action is far more important, and you're going to align shoulder to shoulder, like you've said, with those men. Is it more intentional?
Well, the answer is yes. You need to be the guy that's willing to join that group or start that group. And you also need to be a guy that's worthy of that group. So it's a circular thing. Because let's say you're the lone wolf who's worthy of a group like that, but you're unwilling to join one. Well, that's not really going to hurt that's not really going to, help you with your isolation. That's not really going to help you with your inability to depend on people. Right. And so the question I often get and this is after people have gone through the material, they've seen me talk about how to do it and what types of guys to identify. They're still stuck somehow. Like, what do I need to do? It's like, find 2 other guys and set a weekly meeting and figure it out. Like, I kind of got lucky. The group that I'm with right now, my current Foxhole, this is a group that's been meeting for like 13, 14 years on Sunday nights, reading books and doing jujitsu and working out. Right. I've only been a part of this group for like 5 years. Right. So I kind of like happened into it. But guess what? There are people that opt in and opt out of this group all the time. We have transients. We have people that'll come and train for a couple of weeks. And then my workouts are a little bit too hard. And then they take 2 months off and then they come back for a week, take 3 weeks off, come back for 2 weeks. There's that.
Sure.
But again, categorically, that's not a foxhole guy. They can show up to work out, but that's not a guy I'm going to rely on. That's not a guy I'm going to pour my heart out to. That's not a guy that I'm going to depend on if my life's falling apart. But yeah, most of these guys, it's kind of the same thing. Like what's the easiest, dating advice whenever you're in your late teens or early 20s and you want to get married? It's like, you need to become the person that you're looking for, right? It's that thing. It's piffy. It's on these dorky movies and, all these people can kind of be like, oh, become the person that you want your person to like all that kind of stuff. But the application is actually true.
Right.
Because guess what? You might want to be in a group of guys and you may not be ready for that group of guys. Maybe you're a liar. Right. Maybe you just love lying. You love, pretending. Right. You love projecting this faux machismo or something like that. Maybe you're just immature.
Right.
Maybe you're so unbelievably wounded that you use that wounding and you pull the sword out of your own heart and stab other people with it. So there's a lot of issues that kind of go into that. And again, this isn't a 12-hour podcast, so we can't get into all the details, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a better idea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what is the distinction that you make between, say, like a Foxhole guy and someone that doesn't necessarily meet that criteria, but is in need of discipleship? Do you make a distinction, or how do you go about that?
It's kind of one of the, I've never actually been asked a question like that. I do go into, I think it was in day 6 or day 7, I can't remember, but what a Foxhole guy is and what a Foxhole guy isn't.
Right. Yeah.
But you kind of know. Mm-hmm. You do kind of know, or maybe I kind of know. Maybe I have the curse of knowledge a little bit here because I'm the one that, kind of came up with this or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
But if it's a guy, like I'm just trying to remember from the things that I wrote, if it's a guy that you never see, they're not in your Foxhole.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Maybe they were your best friend when you're 18, but you're 45, brother. Yeah. You still love him. You'll still drop what you're doing to fly to where he's at and, be there with him and all that. But that's not a person that is consequential to your life.
Right.
That doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean that you won't disciple them. It doesn't mean that you won't care for them if they're in a time of need, but it means they're not a consequential person for your life. So it's fairly basic. Like these people, you just have to be around them. And that's almost the thing that I think guys should focus on more so is guys love these Hail Mary guys things. And so once a year they go to the lake with their high school buddies, right? And that's their Hail Mary guys time. Mm-hmm. Or, once a year they'll get together and play golf and watch the Masters with the guys they used to be in a fraternity with. Or, once every couple of years they'll do a reunion with the guys that were in their platoon or something like that. And it's like, those things are fine. Those things are good, but that's not community. It's the same thing I was talking about with the church. These churches are not trying to make their environments man friendly. They're just trying to do programming that makes them feel better.
Sure. Yeah. I guess what I'm asking is, I get that there is a criteria, which, man, you lay out, and I got pages of notes here on it because it was very good as far as what we're looking for in terms of a Foxhole guy. But as far as discipleship, right? Like I know a guy that I've met with. I don't know that he's not Foxhole material necessarily, but I feel like there is that potential that down the road. So do I just say, yeah, you don't fit the bill, or do I engage just on a different level as far as trying to bring him along and disciple him? Does that make sense?
I'm totally fine with people doing that. The thing that every individual guy has to answer for themselves is how much time do I have to give? Right. And how much am I giving to this person? Sure. Right. And so if you're neglecting your wife or your kids or your Foxhole or your church family so that you can disciple this turd and try to shine them up a little bit, maybe you have to have a discussion with your wife and you say, hey, boo, I know that we do date nights every Thursday. Every other Thursday, would you mind if I gave a little bit more time to this kid? I think he's got a lot of potential and I really want to be there for him. The answer to that's either yes or no. And that's a decision that you get to make for your family. Yeah. And so at no point would I ever prescribe to somebody like, if they're not a Foxhole person, kick them out of your life. And then maybe kill them. Maybe they're not even worthy of breath. Like I would never be the type of person that would say that. But that is such a contextual question to each individual person's life that if you see potential in somebody, but even like, I don't know how old you guys are, but maybe there's a teenager in your church or in your community that is just, he's a wasteland of bad decisions because his dad's not around. His mom can't be around because dad's a deadbeat. So she's off working or doing something else or trying to find the next daddy, pseudo daddy that can kind of come in and do that type of thing. Maybe that's a good thing for you to do. Well, guess what? That 16-year-old knucklehead's probably not a Foxhole guy. Right. But that is still a great relationship to cultivate for his sake. Right. So there's a lot of different things, but in terms of just the Foxhole itself, I go into all that detail in the devotional in terms of like and what specifically guys should focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
You kind of hinted at it too. The guys that get together the once a year of like, man, I want to get together with my frat bros, and in their head they kind of go, that's my guy time. Like it's all once a year. So kind of to that, I want to flesh out a little bit to the individual who has a guy friend who lives 1,000 miles away. I don't want to water down this concept of a Foxhole, and so maybe the person is listening to this going, well, I got a Foxhole, but they live 1,000 miles away. What would you say to that?
You don't have a Foxhole.
Right. Simply put.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to water down this concept. And I think, again, we're lazy, right? And so I think there's going to be guys out there that do that go, man, but my best friend from high school, but he lives 1,000 miles away. Simply put, you don't have a Foxhole.
I think we all have to be honest with ourselves. And I meant to be terse in my response, but again, this is why I use the language very specifically that I use, that is this person consequential to your life? So here's a, for instance. So for me, like everyone's got their cross to bear, their sins that they struggle with. So for me, it's lust. And so I used to have a really big problem with looking at porn and masturbating. Okay. That was a big trigger point for me. It has not really been a problem for over a decade now. Thank God for that. But it's not one of those things that I just prayed and God magically took it away. He gave me the ability to not do these things. And now he's expecting that of me. So for instance, I have had many different people that were part of my accountability teams because people were less consequential than they were a season ago. Right. And so just think about it. If you have to move for work and you're now in a new city, you might still have love for the people that were there, but guess what? They're not around you anymore. Right. So they're not consequential. You're not going to bump into them at your local Kroger or Walmart. Like that's not something that's going to happen. And so that's the thing that I want guys to really focus on is I think they think it's all or nothing. Right. Are you saying I don't have my best friends from grade school anymore? No. No one ever said that. You made that up. But this person is not consequential to you anymore. If you move back into that community, guess what? You got a whole backlog of consequence in connection with this person, but not right now, brother. You just don't have that. And the thing is we all go through seasons of life. And I use this as an example, not to demean anybody, but just to express reality. I got married on May the 13th of 2009. Okay. I had 4 guys next to me for the reception, my best man and 3 other groomsmen. My best man, he and I are on a text strain. So we text, 5-6 times a week, but I might see him 3 or 4 times a year. Another guy, he's kind of part of our inner circle here at Undaunted, but still a guy that I might see once or twice a year. Another guy, I will probably go a year or 2 without seeing or even hearing from him. I actually just reached out to him recently because his mother passed away. First time he and I had spoken in months. And then the last guy I have not seen or heard from essentially since my wedding.
Wow.
I know he has kids, but I don't know how many. I don't know where he lives. I don't know what his job is. I don't know if he's still married. I don't know anything about him. That just happens. He joined the military and he moved away and we got completely disconnected. Okay. And people would be like, well, why don't you rekindle that relationship? I was like, because I already had it. Right. That was a relationship for a time period. And that just happened to be a huge chunk of my childhood. But that relationship was 15 years ago. And I mean, these guys are like, they're sitting around like trying to, it's almost like, have you ever been in a position where you're like romanticizing the person you used to date? Like guys that are currently married will do that with the other girl that they fell in love with. Like, oh, I wonder what life would be like. I think that's a terrible Garth Brooks song, but it's like, I wonder what life would have been like if I had married this person and what would our kids be like? And what would all those different things, but you're romanticizing the 5% of the things about that person that were perfect. And you're forgetting about how miserable you were when you were in that relationship, or you're forgetting about how much of an idiot that person was. Like, or back in your relationship, all the things that they did to try and drag you down. I'm just using these as examples. But the example of even in my own life, it's just seasons. These guys don't live where I live. They don't go to church where I go to church. They don't value the same things that I value. They don't read books. They don't exercise. They don't have a spiritual life. And so it's not that I hate them. It's not that I've cut them off completely. If they called me right now, I would interrupt this interview to take the phone call because I love them. There's not consequential.
Yeah. I like that. That makes good sense.
Going into like managing this foxhole for a little bit. What was the one I was going to poke at? Excuse me. Oh, what if, and I'm sure it happens with guys, what if this foxhole takes up too much time and your wife, it's going to happen one evening where she says, babe, you're spending too much time with this. How do you handle that?
Again, another very contextual question, because there are couples that have to have time together. This kind of goes back to the 5 love languages. Like if your wife's love language is quality time, you better give her as much quality time. You better fill that love tank. And if her love tank is filled up with, acts of service, you need to be doing those acts of service. So I think it's contextual to everybody, because I have guys that are in my life that I swear to goodness, they see their buddies more than they see their wife and kids. And the family operates great like that. They all love to go out and do, but then they know home base is home base and they spend that quality time together, but they're constantly out doing other things, filling up other love tanks, other places. That doesn't really reflect my life very much, right? Like my wife and I do better when we're together, or better when we have a seeming understanding of where the person's going to be and what they're going to be doing. But I don't know that there are very many guys that are spending too much time with their foxhole as opposed to their family. I know a lot of guys that are spending too much time with their work friends, are spending too much time with their drinking buddies or spending too much time with their golf buddies or their jujitsu buddies because they don't want to deal with the problems that they left behind at home. They don't want to deal with the relationship problems with their spouse. They don't want to deal with the relationship problem with their kids. And so again, I hate to be kind of broad stroke about something that could be very, very highly specific to an actual person. But for the most part, guys are not desiring more time with their foxhole. It's for other guys to do fun things. But I will say this as well, and then you guys can hop back in. The number one thing that can kill a foxhole is a disputatious wife. A disputatious woman, a whiny, naggy woman. Mm-hmm. The woman that says, oh my gosh, didn't you hang out with your friends last month? Is it Foxhole Day again? That is the number one thing that will kill it, because guess what? Most guys are going to be like, all right, I only have a few chips. I literally have poker chips sitting right here. I only have a few. So let me drop a few in the wife bucket and then I'll save the rest for myself. It's just not worth the fight for most men.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So how do you intentionally engage? I mean, you obviously work out together. You do jujitsu. How do you intentionally engage these other areas, whether that be on the intellectual or the spiritual level? How do you do that intentionally? What does that look like for your group?
Yeah. So with our group, first thing is we don't meet at random. We meet every Sunday at 7 at the same place. Right. So there's not a text that everybody's waiting on to figure out whether or not we're going to be training today or where we're going to be training. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows what book we're reading and they know where they need to be. So when you get there at 7, we start the book discussion. Then I lead people through a workout. And if they're still alive, then we train jujitsu. And that's great for our team. Now, the other stuff, guys, the relational stuff, the spiritual stuff, that comes as an offshoot of that group. Because one thing that we don't do is, this isn't a Bible study. So we're not going through the book of James and trying to figure out, what we think theologically about this or that. Right. That's not really something that this group does. If I was more in control of this group, then that's probably something that I would steer it to. But I think it's worked pretty darn well for the last 14, 15 years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of a thing. But then from this group, there's an expectation that if you have issues, you bring it up at the group. So there have been plenty of Sundays where we're supposed to be going through chapter 6 and all of a sudden a guy raises his hand. He goes, guys, I'd really like to go through the discussion, but I need help. My marriage is about to end. Mm-hmm. And then we all close our books and it's counseling time. Or that's a little bit forward. Some guys aren't really like that. It's the end of the night. It's 9:00. We're cleaning up the mats. We're getting changed. We're getting going. Someone pulls you aside. Hey, Kyle, I really need to talk to you, man. I'm really up against it at work. I just don't really feel like I can make the quota for this quarter. And this would be the second quarter in the row. I got 4 kids. They're going to fire me. I need some help. Those are just things that happen. And you know why they happen? Because we're around each other.
Right. Yeah.
We're consequential. They knew where they needed to be. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit that led them to pull a guy aside and have a conversation with them. There was a group that a kind of a subgroup of our group that wasn't really formal, but it was like I forget, they called themselves like the divorced dads or something like that, because all of them had marriages that were horrific and the divorces were absolutely painful. Kids were involved, like these horrible things. And so these guys would get together on like Friday nights and they would have a few beers and talk about, kind of lament where they got to in their lives and why did their wife cheat on them and why did they cheat on their wives and why did those types of things. And so that was kind of like a subgroup that they were able to do, but it wasn't formal, I guess. The only thing was formal was Sunday at 7. And if you show up at 7, you're expected to stay until 9. You're expected to work as hard as possible. And the expectation is that you read the book and you're ready for a discussion. Mm-hmm. Those few little bitty hoops that you have to jump over leads to all these other things. But it's not just a fairy tale, because if you listen to my podcast for any length of time, there was a member of my foxhole last year that killed himself. Yeah. And I recorded an entire episode on it and I don't really want to rehash it right here. That guys can go look at, but it was called Foxhole Funeral, Land in the Quiet. And even with all those things that have happened, even with all the intentionality, even with all the, the ways for guys to connect, somehow Landon fell through the cracks. And somehow things went so unbelievably bad for him that he decided his only way out was to eat a bullet, and he did. I
want to say I'm sorry for your loss, man. Yep. How has that impacted the way you guys do business, or has it, as far as your interaction in the foxhole?
It has certainly created a ripple effect for our group that I think is hard for most of us to even define, really. But I will say that if a guy seems a little bit off at group, like let's say he normally talks and he's not talking as much. He normally, plays around and razzes people, but he's not really doing that. I don't think we all have, we don't let that slide, I guess. That person is getting a text like immediately after the group closes, or they're being pulled aside by somebody or several somebodies. Hey, brother, you doing good? You looked a little bit off tonight. What's going on? Oh man, I'm just tired. No big deal. Like I know I was a little bit off, or it's something serious.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it is, and this is what happens in the wake of every suicide, everybody thinks that they could have done something, right?
Sure.
What if I would have known? What if I would have called him when I thought about it, but then I got busy? But that, that's not helpful. Right. That's not really helpful to anybody. That person made a decision, Landon, without getting into all his business. Let's just say there was enough evidence to suggest nobody would have been able to stop him. Sure. This was not an emotional decision that he made one day when he got super upset. This was planned out to an unbelievable degree. It's unfortunate. It's sad, but it's just it's a byproduct of the fallenness that we live in, this post Genesis 3 world. But for us in our group, we don't really let, that guy seems off, become something that just goes back into our, the back of our Rolodex. It's something that we try to address early on in it. That wasn't like we had a discussion and we had, a parliamentary procedure and we all voted on it. And we will now always ask a guy if he feels okay. It's just, I think everybody remembers in the back of their mind, we don't want to do that again. We don't want to go through that again as a group. Yeah. And so if there's something we could do to mitigate that or, nip it in the bud, we're going to.
Yeah. Now what is... and maybe this is a little down a rabbit trail a little bit, but as it pertains to Landon's family, is there something that the Foxhole is doing to minister to the family, or is there anything in the future as far as that goes, engagement and encouragement?
I would love to answer your question specifically, but there are some, let's see, let me put my lawyer hat on. There are some extenuating familial circumstances that will make it difficult for us to have a direct hand in helping his children in the wake of his death.
Okay. That's fair. I appreciate that.
Kyle, we have you for a few more minutes?
Yeah, I probably got another 10 or 15.
Okay. I don't know if we wanted to start wrapping it down. I know if there's anything you want to talk about, like managing the group anymore or getting like onto the I like these practical questions.
Yeah, well, yeah, man. Let's just go wherever you want to go, man.
Well, one, it kind of tickled me. Mrs. Douglas, so Chris's wife.
Wait, hold on. Actually, I'm
what
sorry.
What the heck are we doing? What is going on?
All right.
We're falling completely off the rails.
Because I feel like we were talking about like that accountability and that, because I know the question that's coming.
Oh, okay.
A few months ago, and I had already mentioned this, we did like a battle buddy check-in, and I guess I'm curious as far as the Foxhole goes, is there a liberty? Okay, because I think as a man, I approached Joseph some time ago, and I asked him very pointed, very specific questions. Now, if I did not have a relationship that I have with Joseph, he would have told me to piss off. He would have said, that is none of your dang business. Back up, okay? However, I think that developing a relationship to where I have the liberty to ask these specific questions that are uncomfortable, and then on the other side of that liberty is that honesty to say, yeah, it's not good. To be honest, to put the shield down. Is that a liberty that needs to have happened?
Yeah, if you're so scared that you don't think you can bring something up to some guy, one of two things is reality. Number one, he's not an actual Foxhole guy. Or number two, you're not living up to your standard of being a Foxhole guy either. And so most guys don't realize that all they have to do to help a guy out is to put some relational chips. Second poker reference in this podcast, you're welcome. But is they have to put some relational chips in the center.
Yeah.
And so I'll give you an example. There's a guy in our Foxhole, has a lot of kids and his marriage was kind of falling apart. He was unfaithful. And I seem to gather that most of the guys in his life were taking his side. Now his wife was a lunatic. So let's just be straight up: mental disorders, crippling laziness as a person. So she's not without sin or fault here, but he was the one that made a decision to sleep with somebody else. And everyone else was kind of taking a side. And yeah, man, I know it's been rough for a long time. And man, you just got to kind of do what it is to make you happy and all that. And I went up to him and I said, hey, buddy, you made a covenant before a holy and just God. And I'm here to make sure that you honor it.
Yeah. Love it, man.
And
Attaboy.
the thing about it, what is the worst case scenario? He punches me in the face.
Yeah.
That is worst case. And guys, if you haven't been punched in the face before, it's not that bad. You should try it. Like, you're not made of glass. You're not going to die, probably. Unless it's Francis Ngannou, and then you're definitely
Right.
not
Yeah,
die.
yeah, definitely.
He's not in my foxhole, so I don't got to worry about it.
Fair enough.
But that's the thing, is I put relational chips in the center of the table because it wasn't about me. And it wasn't even about him. It was about God and how much God hates sin and how much he wants him to be honored, right? And the honorable thing to do would have been for him to fight for his marriage. And you know what he did? He decided to fight for his marriage. Now, that's not my credit, okay? Yeah. There were other guys in his life that were telling him something similar to me, maybe not in the same way, but very similar. But we have all these people. We live in this world where, life is supposed to be easy and comfortable and no one's ever supposed to challenge you and you're always right and your truth is your truth and all these different things. And this relativistic nonsense, even inside the church, leads to people making sinful, horrible decisions that have ramifications, not just for themselves, but for their progeny, for their generations to come, right? And so if you have a guy in your life and you don't have a deep enough relationship with him where you feel like you could at least bring something up. Hey man, you're smoking cigarettes. Are you that dumb? Like, do you realize that you're not going to be around for your daughter's wedding? Is that what you want? How stupid are you? Like, do you want to be walking around with an oxygen tank at the age of 52? Like, if you're not willing to say that to that person, you don't love that person. Because we've gotten this idea culturally that the way that you love people is that you just accept them, right? Oh, I accept you. Oh, you're a guy and you like sleeping with dudes. I love you. I accept you. I'm not going to judge you and say what you're doing is sinful and wrong. Oh, hey, you've been cheating on your wife because your secretary is a smoke show. I totally get it. But that's okay. Your wife decided not to have sex with you anymore because there's no spark in the relationship anymore. You got to ejaculate somehow. You might as well do it into the secretary. That's great. No. That is not what you do. You don't tell guys what they're doing that is destructive, that is going to end up killing them, that's okay. Yeah. And some guys, you're telling them that it's okay by saying nothing because you just gotten this idea that if I ruffle anybody's feathers, then maybe I will lose them as a friend. Well, guess what, brother? That's not somebody you want on your side because if you're in the thick of it and you're not seeing clearly and you're doing things that hurt the heart of God and hurt his creation and are sinful, you want guys that are willing to put some chips in the center as well. Because and I use this example a lot. I'm a very sarcastic guy. I like to be funny. Sometimes I go too far and sometimes I go too far with my wife. If I'm at dinner, like a couple's dinner with my spouse and with some other people, if I say an off-color comment that is demeaning to my wife that I think is funny, I fully expect as we get up and we walk to our tables or I get up to walk to the bathroom, that my Foxhole guy that is sitting there, that he snatches me up by my shirt, says, brother, I love you. But you made your wife feel really, really small a second ago, and I'm not going to stand for it. And whenever you're done being angry and embarrassed right now, you're not going to want to stand for it either. Don't do that again, right? Worst case scenario is I get blasted in the face, right? That's the worst case. Just do it. If you really, really love these people, you would be fine with the awkwardness.
Yeah.
That's good.
I love
That's gold, man.
Yeah. Well, you use that as an example in your episode, and I was like, I wrote a note because I thought that's a great example. And like, I can imagine there's somebody listening and probably listened to that and they were like squirming in their seat as you said that. Cause it's like, well, that's uncomfortable. But like you say, the worst case scenario. Yeah. And again, in love doesn't have to feel like love. Right. Love is truth, right? We should never sacrifice truth on the altar of peace. Never. Yeah. So.
And speaking to our scenario, what it was Chris absolutely surprised me at my job. He came and was like, I need to talk to you. He didn't tell me he was going to do this. And the funny thing, I guess, is that in that moment, I needed someone to call me out. And he didn't know that. He didn't know I was struggling with something. He just approached me. Hey, how is things going? Where are you failing at? And I said, man, it's funny that you would do that because something I need to work on with my wife, and it's been eating at me. And like that was the kick in the pants I needed. So after I punched Chris in the face, I was like, "Man, let's go home and fix this with my wife right away."
He's got like little Burger King hands, man. No. Like hardly left a mark.
That's okay. Hey, we can't all be Francis. Some of us are Michael Bisping. We get it.
Shots fired.
Hey, I do want to ask you a question, though. We've actually debated about this for months.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited.
Oh, no.
You are a jiu-jitsu guy, and you know how to throw down. Okay, we have debated about if right now Joseph, so he's not trained in any martial arts or anything like that. Now he's a strong guy. I think his brother is like a junior world champion.
My brother Logan Dobbs is a senior world champion.
My bad.
In Olympic weightlifting.
Okay. So anyways, so Dobbs are strong. But if he fought Amanda Nunes, like who would win?
They would. Not Amanda Nunes. She's a woman.
All right.
So here's the deal. So Amanda Nunes is the greatest female fighter of all time, notwithstanding her last performance against Juliana Pena.
Right. Yeah.
Women that she has fought have said she hits me like the men in the gym hit me. Like that's how hard she hits.
Right.
But here's the reality. She's a 145-pound female.
Right.
She knows how to fight.
Yes.
But that doesn't bridge that gap of 200 pounds of man meat. Now I will say this. I had a buddy who doesn't know anything about fighting because he doesn't train. He's never punched anybody with ill intent in his heart or tried to choke anyone to death. So that's just a unique feeling that only comes from training and doing that for a long time. Mm-hmm. He asked me a trap question and he said, who wins in a fight, a real fight, The Rock or Nate Diaz? Now, the reason why he asked me is because he knows I don't like either one of those guys. I think The Rock is a turd. I don't think he's funny. I hated him when he was a wrestler. And Nate Diaz is one of my least favorite fighters of all time. He's wicked, ridiculously overrated. The Rock is probably 250, 260 pounds. Nate Diaz walks around about 180, and then he'll cut down to 170 and all those types of things. If those men fought 100 times, Nate Diaz wins 100 times out of 100, and he probably never gets bloody. The thing is because The Rock is good at fake fighting. Right. He's good at theater. Yeah. He's good at pretending, but he doesn't know how to fight.
Right.
The thing is the difference isn't really male, female, or big and little. It's trained and untrained. Because one guy in my Foxhole, he is a retired Olympic wrestler. He's 135 pounds. He and I have gone at each other a bunch. I'm a 195. I've taken him down legitimately one time. Now, in a jiu-jitsu match, he's in trouble just because, he doesn't know jiu-jitsu as much as he knows takedowns.
Right.
And I've literally got one, and it was a surprise to both of us. Right.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's always the big guys. The big guys assume that if they ever got into a physical altercation, they're like, well, I'll just be big and I will win because I'm big, because science somehow. No, you will fall to the level of your training. And the number of the biggest killers in our gym are between 5'9" and 6'1" and 175 and 210 pounds.
Yeah.
These are not Adonises. These are not massive, huge, ridiculous people. And some of the nastiest, most violent, dangerous human beings I know are like 5'8", 150, 160 pounds.
Yeah.
And if your brother, your Olympic weightlifter, your whatever came in the gym and put a gi on, they would get tapped over and over and over again. Right. There's a 0% chance they would do well. It's trained and untrained. That's just the reality of it. But the thing is people have asked me, like, could you beat up Amanda Nunes? The answer is yes, but you can't say that out loud.
Sure,
right?
But I'm saying if Joseph has no training, because you're saying a whole lot about training, and I fully agree. But that's why I lean towards Amanda being able. She is trained.
No, there's a fundamental difference between the ability to control another human being with the male body and the ability to control a human being with the female body.
Yeah. Well,
so, for instance, there are women in our gym that are amazing at jiu-jitsu. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I don't roll live with women because it can be a little bit weird and, all those types of things. But there are times whenever you'll do a drill, right, with a girl. And the thing about it is these are girls that are purple belts, brown belts. They go to tournaments and they're smashing their brackets. They're absolutely killing people. Mm-hmm. And even me at my level right now, a blue belt, eventually I'll be a purple and I'll keep, working my way through. They can't do anything to me that I don't allow them to do. Right. They will not be able to take my back unless I let them take my back. And the thing about it is I'm never going full bore against a woman either. Right. Yeah. And so that's the thing is the trained and untrained is specific to your gender, and which is irrevocably tied to your sex, right? So if you're a female and you're learning to control other females, that will help you. That's why I'm a little bit iffy about these girls that are like, I'm 125 pounds. I don't lift, but I'm doing jujitsu for self-defense purposes. It's like, well, guess what? You're not going to work guard in a street fight if you're a female cop and there's a 200-pound dude that's hopped up on meth. I'm sorry, you're going to lose and you're probably going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that reminds me, as a joke, I thought a YouTube channel, a good idea would be, you can't do this in today, but what if men went out and surprised these females who are taking self-training and they're saying, I could face any guy in the alley. And these guys were surprising them and showing them that that's absolutely not true. I think that'd be a good idea, but I don't.
Yeah, you don't want to do that in Oklahoma because we can still carry here and we will kill you. But that's just kind of the thing is you probably couldn't do that. But I know a lot of girls that, they're overconfident in their jujitsu ability.
Yeah.
And in a street fight, there are no rules. So when you have a guy in class who's not going to go knee on belly because he doesn't want to put his knee instinctively where your ovaries might be, that's not going to happen on the street. A guy's going to mount you and he's going to pound you into the pavement.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
A little tough love for the ladies out there. Hey, here's one from the gals. So Mrs. Douglas, Chris's wife, wanted to ask if you find most of your Foxhole friends have wives that are close with other Foxhole wives. So is the wives in the consideration when doing this Foxhole or
not with mine.
Okay.
I haven't really seen a lot of that. Typically, if your Foxhole are your church people, perhaps the wives also get together. But like our fight club, that's what we call our Sunday night, our fight club. The wives don't ever get together. Now, some of the wives know each other, right? Because maybe we go to the same church or they were friends in high school or maybe there's some sort of connection there. But yeah, there's no connection here. Now, I would say if all of our wives knew each other and all of our kids knew each other at that crazy deep level, would that make the Foxhole even tighter and even better? Yeah, but that's just not really how mine works. But I would say if you have that, if that is an ability and you have somebody that owns some land, you want to do a big cookout and everybody brings everything. That's something that our fight club does is like, we'll do these get-togethers where it's family friendly, like bring the kids, bring the wives and all that. That's something I talk about in the Foxhole as well. You should know your Foxhole guy's wife's name. You should know what she's into. You should know the kids' names. You should know in general what age they are. Take notes on your phone. That's how I do it. I don't just remember these things. Yeah. White people in 2021 named their kids stupid and ridiculous things. Like I can't remember all these names and how to spell them. So I'll put them in the notes in my phone. Right. Yeah. And I think I got the year wrong, 2022, but you guys get the idea, but it's good to know those people, but I don't know that it's a prerequisite.
Sure. No,
good. Fair enough.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Okay. How long have we got you for, Kyle?
How many more questions you got? I'm looking at the clock too, but my baby's asleep right now. So I had a joke one for you. I just wanted to see your response. So if the Foxhole was sort of built off of how Jesus and the disciples rolled around, should our Foxhole then, to further simulate that, should we have a Judas in our Foxhole? Judas was a necessary thing to the ability for there to be a bridge to the Father. Yeah. And so that was part of prophecy that he was going to be betrayed with a kiss. And so, no, I mean, even in the Foxhole series, I give you exact ways how you can eradicate someone from your Foxhole. Yep. Yeah. And so, and the thing about it is if you're in a Foxhole and you're looking around for the Judas and you don't see him, he's probably you. And so that's not, I don't really want to put that in guys' brains that they should be looking for Judas.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I mean, part of so Chris sent me your series to listen to and absolutely loved it. But one of the things I walked away going was not only, okay, well, who's in my Foxhole, but man, am I worthy of being in this Foxhole? Like there was a lot of self-reflection coming out of that series.
Absolutely.
I think that's been the big thing for a lot of guys is they're reflecting themselves. And you want to talk about another unintentional thing. I didn't intend for most people's takeaway from that series to be like, am I a Foxhole guy? But, I said it, and then that's what guys attach themselves to, even though that was just kind of an afterthought for me, because it's just like, well, duh. Like, if you're going to be in a Foxhole, and here I am laying out what you should look for in Foxhole, guys, shouldn't you check some of those marks as well? Yeah. But I will say this for guys that look at that list, because I've had guys email me, and they're like, I looked at your list of what a Foxhole guy is, and they're like, I don't think I meet those standards. And it's like, but is that your aspirational identity to be a guy who meets those standards? Right. Well, yeah. Okay, then do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Like people love to complicate things. Like the same thing. Like I did, the ways to avoid being a crappy man in 2022 podcast fantastic. Earlier this month. And I just laid out there in the very first one. It's like, stop looking at porn and jerking off.
Yeah.
And it's like, people are like, well, what do you mean? They're like, I've been looking at porn and struggling with it for a long time and I can't kick it. It's like, because you haven't stopped doing it.
Right.
Like, I don't know how to make this easier. It goes back to, I remember when Jocko Willink used to do Q&As on his Twitter page several years ago. People would be like, I'm really struggling with pull-ups. How can I get better at doing pull-ups? And his response would be, do more pull-ups. Yeah. Right? Like these guys are like, I want to get better at distance running. How do I do that? And so they'll read blogs and they'll buy these series and these videos and these studies and they'll read about the best shoes and best blah, blah, blah. But they never just tie their shoes and go run. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And so the same thing applies with all this as well. It's like, if that's your aspirational identity, if that's a guy that you should be, then strive for that with a bunch of other guys that are striving for that as well. This idea that the Foxhole is all these perfect men that are fully formed coming together. Like, That's just not set in reality.
Right. Yeah.
These are all broken men that are doing good in one of the three areas: spiritual, mental, or physical resilience. Hopefully at least one of those areas. But that's the whole deal. Like, I'm not very handy. I tell people all the time, that's not really in the paradigm of resilience, but it's like, I need guys to help me with that type of stuff. But then I have a guy that's about to, start a Christian apologetics class, and he has no idea how to create content. Well, that's just something that I do. It's something that just pours out of me. Right. And so it's just having those guys in your life that are better at this part of their life and this season of life and the thing that you need. And you have guys that you can lean on that way.
Yeah, vitally important, man. Vitally important.
And guys, I got time probably for about one more. So,
I guess I want to ask you. So, the contemporary music is for women and effeminate men, dude. I love that, and I know that won like the favorite award for last year. That was good. Why do you think that is so? Why do you think so many people? I loved it, and I sent it to my worship pastor, man.
Yeah, episode 176. The only reason I know the number is because I'm asked about it constantly. But
right, sure.
I think in episode like 2 or 3, I mentioned like one of these days I'll do an entire episode on the effeminate worship music and all these different things and all the problems with it. And it took me 250 plus episodes or almost 175 episodes later to actually do it. But the thing about it is I kept running into guys who were not into contemporary Christian music and they thought they were broken. I had a worship pastor here in my area tell me that because I don't like Christian music, that I might not be saved. And I know that he didn't just think that up when he and I were having lunch. He has said that to people before. Mm-hmm. That's just something that this guy says. Right. And so that's a paradigm that a lot of men are carrying around like, man, I don't like the way these people sound in my ears whenever I'm forced to listen to them. I wonder if I'm going to heaven or not. Mm-hmm. Because here's the thing is that's not anointed music. Okay. That style of music isn't especially pleasing to the Lord in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
It's simply a style of music.
Right.
There you go.
It just so happens to not be my style of music. My buddy, Matty Montgomery, who runs a church out in Tennessee, his worship band has just put out an album. They're a bluegrass band.
Yeah.
So
excellent interview,
God,
by the way.
Right. Is God blessing them more because they have a banjo and a fiddle? Or is he blessing them less because they don't have 17 other people on stage with microphones and only 14 of them are turned on? Right. They're not singing an 18-part harmony here. Yeah. Right. It's just about style. And what we've traded in is the truth and power and grandeur of God for the church that produces the music we like best. Because something that I hear often is, we used to go to that church, but we really didn't like the music that much.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, what a sad state of affairs that we're evaluating music. And again, I get pulled into it as well. But for me personally, my entire paradigm about worship music changed when I was a teenager, when someone handed me a Living Sacrifice album and they said, here's a Christian band. And I'm like, what? I thought this was satanic music because there's double bass pedals and heavy guitars and growly screaming vocals. And it's like, until I read the lyrics, right? So it's just artistic expression. Like, is there any such thing as Christian painting or Christian sculpture or Christian architecture?
Right.
And I don't mean like someone that built a cathedral. I mean, is there a deviation? No, they're just categories, right? This is this is modern and this is cubism and this is Baroque and this is Gothic and this is whatever. They're categories, right? So it just so happens that modern worship music all seems to sound about the same, right? When you listen to K-Love or to Air One or any of that, it's basically the same song, just rinsed and repeated with a different female or effeminate male singing it, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so I guess I recorded that episode, which I highly suggest that your audience go and listen to, because I wanted to let guys know that they're not the problem and that they can be part of the solution as well. The number of people that have shared it with their worship minister or shared it with, or worship ministers that have even reached out to me and say, Kyle, I used to never think about the men when I would pick the songs. I've never been the guy to look at the lyrics of the songs that I was singing and wonder, what are the men going to be feeling when I'm telling them to sing about this Jesus who they should embrace him in his arms, that they should bring him closer to their bosom, that they should rest their head on his shoulder, how that might sound a little bit homoerotic to a manly dude that's not really into that. right? And so I just wanted to give guys license to understand that it's not a them problem, that there's not going to be a church that meets all their needs, that's going to be the best preaching and the best discipleship and the best music and all that, but that there is a standard that should be set. And it shouldn't just be to make sure that all the women in the crowd are in tears by the time the set is over. Because if the women are in tears and overwhelmed with emotion, the men are half asleep or already out the door.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good stuff for sure.
I think that's one of the first episodes you shared with me.
Yeah,
I believe so. And I remember listening to it because I didn't really know what I was getting into. He just said, you got to check this out about music. I'm like, all right. And I remember after being done with it going, man, I never realized how much I didn't like that music until hearing it just put to words going, here's why. Like, I'm with you. Like, I don't line up with those kinds of lyrics or the sweet and soft melody. Like, yeah, I like all kinds of music, sure. But I'm with you when you look around, everyone's soft and weeping. And I'm like, I'm not feeling anything.
I want to make sure people don't hear something that I'm not saying, because someone I did a debate over in a show in the UK, and I represented the more complementarian masculine side, and the other person represented the more feminine, egalitarian side of things. And one thing that I said, and I say often, is I said, there's an overemphasis on the Lamb of God and almost a complete ignoring of the Lion of Judah. And someone wrote into the show and they basically called me a heretic and a blasphemer because they're like, he said the Lamb of God's not important. It's like, that's not what I said. If I were to be even more precise to get it through their head, I would have said the Lamb of God, as compared to the Lion of Judah, is emphasized too much. And that's always proven whenever I go and speak to a group of guys and I say, raise your hand if in the last year you can recall your pastor saying Lamb of God. Everybody in the congregation raises, or everybody in the room raises their hands. They all get it. And then I say, raise your hand if you can remember in the last year that your pastor mentioned the Lion of Judah.
Right.
Smattering of hands. One over here, a couple in the back. Right. Yep. That's the point. Yeah. The same with music. So I'm not saying that your church should hire, for today and bring them back together, or should get Living Sacrifice to do all their worship sets. Like, that's not necessarily what I'm advocating. What I am saying is that the lyrics matter, the type of music matter, who's on stage and how they're carrying themselves and comporting themselves really matters. And so don't just lean on who's in the audience, which is going to be mainly female. If you want more men to be there, you need to plant more seeds that are going to be appealing to men, because men don't follow someone that they're emotionally involved with nearly as hard as they follow someone that they respect and fear a little bit. Right. Yeah. When you think about these generals that lead these men into battle, it's not that they have this deep emotional relationship with all these men. It's that they are strong men. They're good leaders, and they're going to lead these people into battle with bravery and courage. And so that's Lamb of God and Lion of Judah. That's grace and that's truth. That's the power of God, as well as the beauty and sensitivity of that God as well. But we have traded in this scary, just, all-powerful God for this God that we can just roll up and put in our pockets because it makes us comfortable, and it's not right.
For sure. If I could, man, I don't know if this is a question as much as I wanted to just compliment you and thank you so much for being so in the fight for the lives of the unborn. And I think that it seems interesting because your ministry is geared towards men. And obviously we understand that's what makes change. We are called to be the head of our household and to lead. Okay. So we get it, but I think it seems sort of like, oh, that's odd. He's a man, men's ministry, talking about the unborn. But I love that about you, man. So thank you. Why is that? I mean, obviously the word of God, we understand the value of life, but why are you so fervent about that?
Yeah, I think it might just be personality wiring. I don't have some sort of dramatic, abortion backstory. Sure. I'm not the product of a failed abortion, or, my mom wanted to get an abortion, so I stopped her. Like, I don't have that story, but I've always had very little patience for weak people being picked on. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not a very big guy. I mean, I'm 5'10", 195 pounds. I'm somewhat normally sized, but I wasn't a big guy in school. And so I was just big enough to pick on some kids, and I was just small enough to be picked on by others and that type of a thing. But the further I got out, and I don't remember when the big shift came, but it's like, there's no human being on the planet that is more helpless than a human being that's inside the womb of another woman. Yeah. And the fact that we have lied to ourselves to pretend like what's inside of the woman is part of the woman, that it is the woman, or that is of no moral value, it shows the degradation and the callousness of our society that we've gotten to that point. So that's why I talk about it so often, because it's men that are going to be able to help end that fight. Because here's the reality. Almost 100% of the abortionists in America are men. Almost 100% of the people that own abortion mills are men. Almost 100% of the people that pass bills that allow for abortion to take place in their states or in their counties or in their countries are men. So it's men that are going to be the ones that are going to be charged with pushing back this darkness, right?
Absolutely.
You know, if Roe v. Wade this summer is somehow overturned, which I do not have a lot of hope that is going to happen. I just don't think the court will break down that way. I think Justice Roberts is going to be the deciding vote in that if I were to pick. It's going to be a majority male Supreme Court that does that. And it's going to be a majority male governorship that carries out the subsequent laws that would go into place now that Roe v. Wade is no longer the federal standard, because it's not law, but it would no longer be the federal standard. Right. And so why wouldn't I talk to guys about it?
Right.
Because the easiest thing to deal with when people are like, you know, why does it matter? No uterus, no opinion. It's like, well, there's hundreds of millions of women that agree with me. So there goes your argument. Would you like to move on to one that's even vaguely intellectual? And so that's just the thing, is I want guys to have the language. That's why I don't just say, hey, I'm pro-life, abortion's bad. I give guys the tools. I did an episode at the end of last year about how to engage pro-life or pro-abortion arguments, because most guys think that it's an impossible argument to win. But when you realize that your side is the side of virtue, it gets a lot easier.
Yep. Well, and I really appreciated the two-part with Mike Ritland. Dude, that was a fantastic interview. But and I've talked to Joseph about this on the podcast, that when you engage him, I think it was in the second part there where you engaged him on pro-life, and you're like, look, I'm not even going to talk about faith as the standard. I like that, man. I really, again, thank you so much for standing in that gap. Like, that's awesome. And there's a lot to glean from that in terms of truth and stuff. So dude, thank you.
I appreciate that. Part of the thing that guys need to remember, whether you're sharing the gospel with somebody or you're trying to argue them to your side of a political debate or a moral debate, don't let the goal be complete conversion. Let the goal be putting a rock in their shoe. That's what I got from Greg Kokel from his book Tactics. You just want to put a rock in their shoe. Because when I was on his podcast, when I was on Mike Ritland's podcast last summer, we spent a good chunk of time talking about faith and talking about abortion and all that stuff as well. He had never heard somebody elucidate the fact that the overwhelming majority of abortions that take place in the United States are because of convenience. Because roughly 96, 97% of the reasons for abortions are, I don't have enough money. I don't know who the dad is. I'm not ready to be a mother. I can't be a mother again. It's all these different things. It's all matters of convenience, which are not good reasons that we would give for killing somebody that exists outside the womb. So why would we do that for somebody that lives inside the womb? And also, for most men, there are things that you can agree to disagree on, and then there are facts, right? And so let's say you guys believe that LeBron James is the greatest basketball player ever, and I believe that Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player ever. Neither one of us is technically right. Well, actually, it's clearly Michael Jordan, but let's just pretend let's just pretend it was an opinion. Right? You know, no one can prove that the color blue is better than the color red. Right. No one can prove that. It's a matter of opinion. But when life begins, is knowable. It is. It can. We have to define what is life and what does the word begin mean, and then apply that to a human being. And so people are like, well, that's your opinion that life begins at conception. No, it's not. It's verifiable fact. If we look at it scientifically, if we look at it morally, if we look at it theologically, I'm right. You're wrong. Right. And so many Christians are so willing to cede ground to people like, oh, I'm pro-life. But gosh, if the woman was raped, I guess we don't really know what to do with that baby. It's like, that's why I show people when I present about abortion, I show them 2 pictures of ultrasounds. And I say, one is my wife's baby that is currently in her stomach, which I did this recently in my church. And the other is a baby that was conceived in rape. Which one's mine?
Right.
Can you tell? Do you have any freaking idea? That's why we don't kill babies in the womb, because the mother was raped, because you don't give the death penalty to somebody that didn't commit the crime, right? They are the result of the crime. You don't just kill them, because guess what it doesn't do? It doesn't erase the rape, right? It only adds a murder. Right.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Good stuff, dude.
Good
we could go on forever, man. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you. So
absolutely,
Kyle,
guys.
Before we wrap up a little bow on this episode, is there anything you want to plug for yourself?
Yeah, guys, anywhere that you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, YouTube, you can find Undaunted Life, a man's podcast. Just search Undaunted Life, a man's podcast, or Kyle Thompson. You should be able to find it. Our website is where you can get everything else. So it's just www.undaunted.life. In 2022, it's going to be a little bit of an interesting year. We should have some cool things coming out later on this year. But in all honesty, with our second baby coming really any week now, it's kind of trying to figure out what life's going to look like. We can still run man coverage because it's only 2 kids, but that'll change things. But we release 2 episodes a week. It's usually 1 interview a week and then 1 episode about something else that's either a news topic or cultural or moral topic. So yeah, it's a great way for you guys to get involved, but we're here to equip men to push back darkness. All you got to do is come along for the ride.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Kyle.
There you go, brothers and sisters. Normally we wrap up when we challenge you with questions that we want to us, but honestly, I want to direct all traffic to Kyle. Man, we had him on to talk about the Foxhole. We highly, highly, highly recommend you check out that series at Undaunted Life. Hit him up, subscribe. Please check out his stuff. I do believe God is using Undaunted Life to do amazing, powerful, big things. So,
absolutely.
Brother, Kyle, thank you again for coming on. Brothers and sisters, once again, this has been another episode of True Discussion. Until next time, God bless.
God bless.
Hey there, Joseph Dobbs here from True Discussion.
And Chris Douglas.
Look, we wanted to take a second and just say thanks for either watching or listening to our content.
But mostly watching because it's YouTube. And we wanted to just ask that you would take a moment and leave us a thumbs up, that you would subscribe and of course share.
Yeah,
because you
like it
people
and share it and subscribe. We want you to do all those things now. Sorry, but
yeah, now.
But yeah,
what are you
please.
waiting on?
But seriously.